Let's go ahead and get this party started. This July 9th, 2020 Smyrna Business Association virtual program is now called to order. I would like to invite Pastor Shell Osmond of Life Church Smyrna Assembly of God for the invocation and pledge.
Thank you, Nick. Let me apologize again. As you know, we're traveling for a few days, and I have grabbed a Wi-Fi at a local hotel, so I hope the connectivity stays strong. The good news is I'm not really praying to any of you guys, so I know God will hear me even if we have connection issues. But it's a joy to be with you today, and thank you for if you would be followed by Father, a day that certainly will not be free from challenges and difficulties, but a day which you have made. And so as we've been instructed in your word, we're going to rejoice and be glad in the day that we have. We acknowledge the fact that there are many people all around the world who didn't get this day as a gift, and yet you've given it to us. So may we make the best of it. I thank you for all of our business and community leaders, Lord, who are striving to help make Smyrna the incredible city that it is, and even better. I pray that you would guide, Lord God, the meeting today, and pray that everyone would be able to take something away from it that improves their life, their family's life, and certainly the life of our city. Father, it's my honor, while others would offer their prayer in perhaps another name, I'm honored today to offer this prayer in the name of my Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen and amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nick, you're on mute. Can you?
Yes, I am on mute, and I'm just sitting here talking away, and y'all can't hear anything I'm saying. Thank you so much, Pastor Shell, for that. And now we'll have Sarah Sorensen to come up and recognize the Smyrna Business Association Board of Directors and give us some announcements and updates.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your schedule this morning to join us. We're really excited about today's program to learn about what's going on in the market and what is on the horizon. I want to take a moment to recognize the board of directors that you see on your screen. I especially want to thank Georgia Sangster, who has worked really hard with our scholarship program over the last couple of months, and Steve Gardner for all of his work on the sponsorship program. So thank you so much. If you have questions about SBA membership or getting involved, please reach out to one of us. We'd be happy to chat with you and see what we can do to get you working with the SBA this year. As far as announcements, we do have some events coming up. Our next virtual coffee is July 22nd at 8 a.m. That will be via Zoom, and you can sign up for that on our website. The next coffee after that will be August 5th. And then we'll have another networking lunch like this on August 6th. You can text Smyrna to 63975 for updates on our events. You can also connect with us on Facebook or Instagram. And obviously, of course, we'll be sending out periodic emails to keep you informed about upcoming events. Thanks.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And also, we're able to do a lot of the things that we do through the Smyrna Business Association because of our sponsors. And we just had our last sponsorship drive. And as you see on your screen here, we have our sponsors for 2020, 2021. Steve Gardner, if you could give us some updates on the sponsorship program for this year.
Yes, thank you, Nick. And the first thing I want to do is let everybody know that the sponsor drive is complete. It was very successful this year. And I want to thank especially the renewing sponsors. We had 18 sponsors out of 24 that renewed for the coming year. In spite of, you know, the issues that we're having with COVID and the fact that, you know, meetings are different now, et cetera. We had a very strong response from the renewing sponsors. We did have 6 open spots, And you can see the new sponsors listed there: Carpe Telam, Cobb Home Sales, Jonquil Rug Cleaning, Life Church, Twinkle Toes Nanny Agency, and Vision Rehabilitation Services, VRS. All are new sponsors for this year. We had a very strong wait list as well. So I also want to thank all the other members who signed up on the wait list this year. I would just encourage you to, try again next year, and hopefully we'll be able to have a spot for you at that point. So Nick, if you want to go to the next slide, this is the current field of sponsors for the 2021 year. This is all their logos. So we encourage you to really support these sponsors. This is the funding engine for most of the work that the SBA does, especially this year when we've had programs canceled, et cetera. So please, thank the sponsors when you see them, and endorse their businesses if you have the opportunity. With that, Nick, I'll turn it back over to you for the rest of the program.
That's awesome. Thank you very much. And now, do we have someone? We have some sponsor remarks from two of our sponsors. We have Vinings Mortgage, and I believe is Jim Dilmer here for Vinings Mortgage by chance. And then we also have Nicole Long from Twinkle Toes Nanny Agency, West Cobb as well. So do we have anyone from Vinings Mortgage here yet, Sarah?
I don't believe we do. Why don't we start with Nicole, and we'll see if Vinings is able to jump on here over the next couple of minutes.
Okay, that's perfect. Well, I'm going to go ahead and reshare my screen. And I've got a slide here for Nicole. All right, Nicole, you are up.
Awesome. Good. I think it's still morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm so delighted to be a sponsor now for the Smyrna Business Association. I've been a member for a year now, and I've participated in many of the lunches and worked with Georgia on the education committee. So I'm just happy now to be able to sponsor and have a few minutes to tell you about Twinkle Toes Nanny Agency, West Cobb. I am the owner, Nicole Long. I spent 20 years in corporate America before becoming a mom. And after that, I wanted a little more flexibility for my lifestyle, and I bought Twinkle Toes Nanny Agency. And I have been serving families in the West Cobb area from Mableton to Marietta since February of 2019. I just expanded my territory to serve the West Metro Atlanta area, so in town through Midtown, Piedmont Park, Morningside area. We provide both full-time, part-time, and occasional babysitting services for families in this area. All of our nannies are also available to assist with virtual learning. So if there are families who just aren't quite sure about sending their children back into the school environment in the midst of the pandemic that we're in with rising cases, we have a solution for you. And we can help you, even though you're home and have to work, we can provide a nanny for you to help you in that vein. All of our nannies are CPR, first aid certified, and they're background checked. And then we have no upfront fee. One of the other things about our agency is that we're, like you guys, we're homegrown. So we're a local organization. Our families are here. Our nannies are here. I live in Mableton, so I'm in the area. We put people to work back in this area. So now that everyone, having a difficult time through COVID, we have a lot of nannies that we're putting back to work to serve the families. So we're just excited to be here. If you want to contact us, there are two quick ways. You can text nanny to 21,000 and get my digital business card, or you can contact us at our website or by the phone number that's listed. Again, we're Twinkle Toes Nanny Agency, West Cobb, and I'm so excited to serve and to sponsor this year.
That is awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole, for that. And that's an awesome service too, especially right now with everything being up in the air with the schools. Now for Vinings Mortgage, do we have anybody, Sarah, from Vinings Mortgage?
I don't see anyone. If anyone's here from Vinings Mortgage, would you put a quick note in the chat so I can?
If not, that's all right. I've actually done some business myself with Vinings Mortgage, and if anybody right now is thinking about doing any refinancing or in the process of purchasing a home, the interest rates are incredibly low right now. And actually, Jim Delmer over at Bindings Mortgage, they sent over a rate for one of my clients. And I was shocked at how low it was. I was like, what? So, you know, I'm not an official, I don't work for Bindings Mortgage, but it's definitely a company that I've worked with in the past. So I'll give them a quick shout out here since they don't have representation. They do great work and they're on top of things. So that is one of our sponsors, Bindings Mortgage. And I don't even know if I introduced myself at the beginning of this, but I'm Nick Dixon, AKA Nick the Realtor. So just so you know, so I have worked with those guys in the past. So now, we have Janet Lieberman, and she's going to be giving us our Smyrna community update. And she is the director of Keep Smyrna Beautiful. So Janet Lieberman, you now have the floor.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So the city of Smyrna, we have a few things going on. The finance department wants everyone to know that they're going to have their required millage rate public hearings on Monday, July 20th at 7 p.m. and on August 3rd at 10 a.m. and 6:45 p.m. And the first notice will be in the MDJ tomorrow, July 10th. If you have any questions about that, you can contact the finance department directly. And then Tammy Sadler-Jones, our wonderful city administrator, wants to remind everybody to sign up for her monthly newsletter via the city website. Click on the news tab of the homepage and you can get signed up for that. She includes everything going on in the city, all the updates, plus some things going on in the community too. So it's really valuable information to have. And then we want to remind everybody to please complete the 2020 census survey. There is apparently a Facebook challenge for that if you complete the survey. So you can find that information on the city's Facebook page. But it is really important that everyone be counted. It affects what kind of funding we get federally. So we want to make sure that we get everybody in Smyrna counted. And lastly, the Smyrna Recycling Center is open. We are open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, 9 to 3 by appointment. This is to help with social distancing and keep everybody safe. You do need to wear a mask. You can sign up for an appointment at keepsmyrnabeautiful.com/recycling-center. And we hope to see you all out here. That's all we've got from the city of Smyrna.
Awesome, Janet. Thank you so much. And before we get into our keynote speaker here for the program, we're going to do something a little bit different here. We're going to do some Smyrna trivia for a door prize. So for our first door prize, we have a free day to work out at the Hotworks Gym, Sauna, and Yoga Studio. So Sarah is going to ask the question, and in the chat box, whoever gets the right answer will win the prize. All right, so Sarah, if you could go ahead, and I don't know if anybody has any Jeopardy music. No, I'm just kidding. But if you could go ahead and ask the question, and in the chat box, whoever puts the answer in first is the winner. So get your fingers ready.
All right. Here we go, some Smyrna trivia. This historic Smyrna neighborhood is located near Smyrna Market Village and is home to local businesses like Neighbors Feed and Seed and the Grateful Bread Company. Whoa! I think we have a winner.
Yes, it looks like, is Mary the?
Mary Moore.
Mary Moore, awesome. All right, so Mary, we'll make sure to be able to email you your certificate so you can get your workout in. So that's awesome. Mary's ready. The
answer is Williams Park. Sorry, I realized y'all can't see all the chats. The Williams Park is the neighborhood that has Neighbors Feed and Seed and Grateful Bread Company. It's located just across the tracks from Smyrna Market Village. And We're going to do another one of these at the end of the presentation. We have a gift card or a coupon for Nothing Bundt Cakes, Bundt Cake for you. So stay tuned for that. We'll have another one at the end of the program.
Yes. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and introduce to you Marcus Guidry. And Marcus, if you want, you can go ahead and start sharing your screen. And I'm just going to quickly go over some information about Marcus. He's a senior research analyst at JLL, and he is a native of Lafayette, Louisiana. He earned his Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, majoring in finance with a minor in French. He subsequently obtained a Master of Business Administration at Lafayette's B.I. Moody College of Business. Marcus joined JLL in December of 2016 as a research analyst focused on Atlanta's office real estate market. He assists in gathering and interpreting data and information about the local submarkets in an effort to give clients an insight into current market conditions. Today, he's going to be talking to us about the state of the market, how Atlanta and Smyrna entered this downturn, and what's being done to recover. Without further ado, I present to you Marcus Guidry II.
Hello, thank you, Nick. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Awesome. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Everyone, thanks for letting me join you all today. As Nick said, my name is Marcus. I'm an analyst at JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, which is a commercial real estate brokerage firm. Our office is located in Buckhead. I moved to Atlanta in 2016, and in 2018, I and my fiance moved out to Smyrna, and we've loved it ever since. So that's kind of the connection that I had to come in and speak with you all today. And it was fun seeing some of those sponsors, like Cumberland Diamond is where I got the ring for my fiance. But anyway, all right, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm happy to present to you all today. If anyone has any questions, just feel free to cut me off. I don't have the chat pulled up, so if it's asked in the chat, if someone could give me an alert, that'd be great. So the questions I'm hoping to answer today, I want to start off on a larger national macroeconomic scale and work down towards Smyrna and what we call the Northwest submarket. And I want to cover what's going on a national scale with the current recession, and then jump into how Atlanta is responding to and dealing with these changes, and what sort of from a CRE standpoint, what investors and tenants are doing to react. And then third, how Smyrna and the Northwest is really how we can take advantage of what's happening, and what cards do we have to play with during this time. And I think there may be some interesting observations along the way. So hope we all are able to get something out of this. Moving ahead, so just a quick introduction for those of you who may not be familiar with JLL. On our website, we're described as we buy, build, occupy, and invest in a variety of assets, including industrial, commercial, retail, residential, and hotel real estate. From tech startups to global firms, our clients span industries, including banking, energy, healthcare, law, life sciences, manufacturing, and technology. So it's kind of a pretty big umbrella. We are a Fortune 500 company. We're in a bunch of global different markets. Our Atlanta office is in Buckhead, and we have about 350 individuals working at that location. And we're expanding, which is kind of crazy for me to think about. And then who am I? As I said, I'm a research analyst at JLL. I've been there about 3.5 years, and I'm really enjoying it. I moved to Smyrna in 2018. I live in the Forest Hills neighborhood, and I really enjoy it. I focus on the office asset class, so I really mostly today I'm going to talk about how office landlords and how office occupiers are dealing with this change. And I track fundamentals like what buildings are being developed, particularly in Midtown, all those new high-rises, and even in our own backyard at the Battery, what's going on there, what's being developed. And then, I'm a Smyrna resident now, and I love going to Maru and maybe a night out at the Vineyard Wine Market at Smyrna Market Village, and I enjoy it. Just a good time. So happy to be here, happy to get started. So starting off with the national observations, and I'll quickly point out that I am a research analyst, but I specifically focus on the Metro Atlanta landscape. We do have teams who are headquartered in maybe Chicago or New York that focus on national observations. And so a lot of the slides that I'll be pulling for this section come from our national research team. So the first slide really is just a breakdown of past downturns and how the US as a whole has reacted to them. On the left side, you'll see that the average asking rates currently sit at about, in 2020, sitting at about $35 a square foot. Back in the year 2000, this rate was just under $25 a square foot. And this is per square foot per year. Which is the same way that Atlanta tracks it. Some other markets track it on a monthly basis, but anyway, you'll notice this 12.5% and roughly 14% decreases in asking rates for the past two recessions. I'll come back to these numbers later on in this presentation, but I think it's worth knowing what happened in previous recessions and how investors and landlords have reacted, and how long it took for these reactions to take place. On average, we've had 13% rent declines, and it's taken roughly 6 years on average to return to the previous peak levels. If this graph were to continue today, we might see it begin to peak or begin to turn over. I don't think we'd see a massive dip quite yet, but I'm not in the business of forecasting, and I really don't want to steer anyone the wrong way, so I'll kind of stay away from any extreme forecasting. But I think it's helpful to know what's happened in previous recessions, and as the coming months and quarters unfold, it'll help us understand what recovery might look like going forward. If it took 6.5 years to recover in previous recessions, once we get a year down the road in this current recession, we hope to have a better understanding of what's coming. So moving ahead, this is a cool slide. It's essentially a timeline of the first 4 weeks of when COVID started hitting our shores. And what it depicts is the large metros as dots, and the red dots show metros that had a citywide construction shutdown, so they were no longer able to continue developing buildings. And yellow is on the opposite end of the spectrum. Yellow would be like Atlanta, where we are allowed to continue construction. And things might have changed since then. This cuts off in April. A few metros might have changed since then, but I think it's still worthwhile taking a look at the first month of COVID. And then the color of the state indicates whether or not it had a stay-at-home order or not. And you'll notice that Atlanta and sort of the rest of the South, the rest of the Sun Belt, at Houston and Dallas, Texas markets, and Phoenix, we really started off with a pretty big advantage when compared to our larger metro neighbors like the New Yorks and LAs, where they came to a halt sooner and more quickly than we did. And what this tells us is, if I'm, for example, a CEO in New York who's looking at expanding, and I was considering maybe 2 different markets, either LA or Atlanta, looking for a tech hub or something like that. If LA is pretty much completely shut down and they're not allowed to do any development while Atlanta is still going, that's absolutely going to influence my decision in the near term. And so really helped to give Atlanta a pretty clear advantage when compared to some of the other metros. Another thing to consider on this slide is that Atlanta, the storyline that Atlanta continued to build through COVID and is still continuing to develop, particularly in Midtown and Buckhead. I know that a lot of the construction sites were instructed to have sanitation stations and new health protocols set up for the workers. But as far as I can tell, development was not slowed down, except for potentially projects that had not yet kicked off, that had not yet began development. Those might be pushed back a little bit. But for projects that were under development already, we're not seeing a huge impact to that timeline, which just gives more, just gives investors a little bit more to work with when they come to Atlanta. I'll go ahead and move along. So this is a fun slide. We call this our property clock. And it depicts where a metro sits in relation to its asking rates. And this is specifically for office. And if I was to show you this chart, maybe 6 months to a year ago, almost all of these metros would have been over here in the peaking phase. Atlanta was nestled right around here for the past, since I moved to Atlanta. But with what's going on, with all the current events, it sort of shifted the economy almost overnight to where, sure, our rates might not be dropping by 50, 60%, but we are seeing a decline in rates. And we have a little bit more to work with. I shouldn't say that. We're in a little bit safer position than larger metros that are maybe dealing with entire industry shutdowns in some regard. Or if you can picture being maybe an analyst in New York, where maybe I work on the other side of the island and I normally take the subway to get there. I'm no longer able to use that public transportation to get to work. And if I do, it's much more difficult to get done. And so New York and cities like New York or Chicago are going to have a much harder time getting back to normalcy. Whereas Atlanta and a lot of the Sunbelt metros are not as dependent on public transportation. We're, for better or for worse, we're a really car-centric market, and our employees depend on cars a lot. I'm not saying nobody uses MARTA. It's certainly used, but when compared to other similar metros, we're much more car heavy, which gives us a pretty big advantage when it comes to sharing spaces and getting to work in a time when you really don't want to be breathing the same air as a whole lot of other people. To that same regard, we don't have the same office inventory density that some of the larger metros have, like New York, Chicago, or Miami, where, you know, Bank of America is a huge building, but in those other metros, they have dozens and dozens of 60, 70-story buildings that have to really, really work out methods on how to make them safer and more accessible for the hundreds potentially of companies that are in those buildings. Atlanta, our buildings are not that big on average, and so we have a lot more control, especially in the suburbs like Smyrna, like the Northwest, where a client can go in and take a single-story building and really manage how entry and exit from that building is done. But from the national viewpoint, this is what we're seeing, and we don't know how long it'll take to reach the bottoming out phase, but this is currently where we stand. The last slide for the national section deals with sublease space. Sublease space is always something that analysts like myself will track and do our best to get a grasp on. But in recent times, and this is shown on the national scale, 95 million starting in 2020 up to about 110 million. That's an increase of about 16%, which we're not in uncharted territory. We've been here before, but as sublease space increases this much, we have to take note, and I'm speaking from an analyst point of view, we have to take note of the reasons why it's increasing. Because as you may know, not all companies are sort of given the same obstacles as others. A great example, this is for national again, but a great example for Atlanta is State Farm in the Central Perimeter submarket, right where Georgia 400 meets I-285. State Farm had a lot of space up there and still do, but as they develop their new headquarters, they'll be leaving their space that they were occupying originally. And that's a expected and anticipated move in the market that we can plan for, that brokers and investors can plan for ahead of time. And so even though there's sublease space maybe hitting the market, it's something that we were ready to track and we're expecting to talk about. That's in a pretty big contrast from the companies who were maybe dealt a difficult hand during this pandemic and really had to make severe, unfortunate decisions and might have had to leave their space early or downsize. So that being said, there's a lot of different underlying reasons as to why sublease space can increase so dramatically. And it's important for us to really look at why the tenant is leaving as opposed to only showing the numbers. So that being said, sublease space is increasing more than it's been for the last 12 months or so. And this is something that a lot of people in the industry are talking about right now. It's a really hot topic. So I thought I'd share that with you today. That's the end of the national slides that I have. Moving on to Metro Atlanta. Hi, Sarah.
Marcus, can I jump in with a question for you?
Of course.
Let me ask you, we got a question from Tom about what's your opinion on the impact of remote working on the demand and function of office space? And I think that goes to all of this increase of sublet space that we're seeing. I know you said you're going to avoid some forecasting, but can you give us your input or insight on, do you see that sublet space being absorbed into the market, or do you think that there is going to be a new use for it? What are you hearing on that front?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And working from home and teleworking is absolutely, I'm in my bedroom, but it's certainly something that we're trying to wrap our head around and trying to understand what it means. I think the biggest point that's worth mentioning is that it varies industry to industry. One of the trends of Atlanta is that we have had a growing tech scene, thanks to Georgia Tech and Georgia State, that are really, really bringing in a lot of new companies that are exploring Atlanta that maybe otherwise would not have done so. Companies like Norfolk Southern or NCR or Macy's that are kind of planting their headquarters down here. I think industry has a lot to do with it. And as Atlanta grows to be more tech influenced and tech heavy, that's going to help Atlanta weather storms like this where the employees might have to work from home for a long period of time. More traditional firms like CPAs or law firms may hold different values and may have to adjust in different ways. Whether that being giving employees more square footage in their current office space or expanding to give more square foot per employee. We're kind of seeing trends in every direction right now. We're seeing it's so dependent on which industry and company type we're talking about. But going forward, yeah, it's tough to say. I think sublease space, when it's this saturated in the market or when it's becoming this ubiquitous, it would be tough to lease it at a reasonable rate. I think we are going to see sublease space sort of into the market and linger for a little while. And I believe that's going to cause asking rates to drop as investors have to compete with sometimes really cool sublease space that might have just been built out, but it just doesn't make sense for that tenant anymore. I think we are going to see some pain in that regard. But over time, as it gets leased up, that's only going to open the door for more tenants who might not have considered Atlanta or certain submarkets of Atlanta otherwise. If Bank of America Plaza in downtown or some cool building in Midtown has sublease space for, pennies on the dollar, that's absolutely going to invite more suburban tenants, which I know Smyrna may not want to hear that, but might invite more suburban tenants into the urban submarkets like Midtown or Buckhead or downtown. So there's a lot of different sides to it, and it's really hard to kind of pin down an exact path forward. But those are the different sort of aspects that we're seeing in terms of sublease space and what to expect. I think the biggest point, though, is just how tech-focused Atlanta is becoming. And I do have some slides on that, and I'm excited to expand on it as well.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. If there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and push forward. Metro Atlanta observations. So that was the national observations, and now kind of crossing over to Atlanta. My hope is that we get an understanding of how Atlanta sits compared to our competing markets, and also looking internally on what Atlanta's doing. So this slide is similar to the first slide that we saw in that it shows previous recessions, but instead of asking rates, this slide is showing employment change from the previous peak. So you can see in 1990, it took 2 years for employment to kind of go back to what it was at. And then for the 2001 recession, .com and 9/11, it took about 50 months, 49 months to return, and we reached about a 4% unemployment change, negative. And then the 2008 recession was the toughest of them all. So if I was to plot the current happenings, we'd see a major dip down to about 15% down here, but it only happened in the first 4 or 5 months. And so recovery might have a totally different picture. We're just not sure yet what recovery looks like. I think it's helpful to see previous recessions, and we might anticipate a similar trajectory back to normalcy. But for such a quick recession or such a quick change in employment, it's really hard to gauge what's going to happen. I think another point worth mentioning is that the type of employment change or the type of employees is a little bit different this go around. When historically it might have been finance sectors or professional business service sectors, this time it's really heavily hit the retail sectors and tourism and hospitality sectors, where I think getting back into work might take less time, it might take more time. It's just there's so many different factors. But to boil it down, this is what we've seen in the past. Each recession has gotten progressively harder to come back from. But with the current one, we're really watching closely to see what happens. And these lines are for Atlanta, but I think these would mimic the U.S. recession and recovery lines as well. Atlanta has a pretty good one-to-one with the rest of the U.S. We're a pretty diverse metro, and so we tend to have a lot of the same paths and trajectories that the U.S. takes. Okay. I like this slide. So I'm from Louisiana, and it pains me to see New Orleans sort of as an outlier here. And Shell, I noticed that fleur-de-lis on the back of your vehicle there. I'd go Saints, who dat? But anyway, so this shows the tourism employment as a net number down here, and then that number as a percentage of total employment in the metro. So Atlanta is sitting just under 300,000 tourism-focused employees in terms of just net number, but that only represents just under 12% of our total employee base. And you can see that we're pretty much in the average pool of metros here. There's really nothing extremely noteworthy about these numbers that Atlanta hosts. The markets like Orlando, Las Vegas, and New Orleans that have maybe the same number of total employees, or in New Orleans' case, fewer, but they represent a much larger degree of their economy. These metros are going to be a lot more vulnerable to this specific recession just due to the nature of the recession itself, how it's based on a virus. But this is a slide that we would show potential investors who are considering moving to Atlanta or expanding in Atlanta. This is something that we would show as a strength for Atlanta, where we have a great number of tourism focused jobs, and we see a lot of visitors in the state and in the metro, but we're not too heavily dependent on it for survival compared to a Las Vegas. And I've been to Vegas and I love Vegas, but surely they are going through some pain right now as travel is highly restrictive and people just aren't able to go out as much. So this is really a great advantage that Atlanta has that I think we're still leveraging more and more. Okay, this slide is pretty interesting. It kind of expands on the previous slide. This shows a breakdown of Atlanta's industry base, and it separates them into groups of high risk, medium risk, and low risk. The high risk industries at the top: trade, leisure, mining, and logging. You'll see that they only comprise 32% of our employment base, while the medium risk and low risk industries like construction, professional services, education, government, etc., they comprise over 50% of our employment base. And surely this is going to continue to grow as, maybe not surely, but I anticipate this percentage really holding steady as tech continues to expand in Atlanta, as names like Microsoft or Google relocate here or expand in Midtown and really take a lot of space and hire a lot of folks. This will set up Atlanta to be uniquely able to weather these pandemics and these recessions where we may not be able to go into the office, but working from home is a viable option for a lot of these employment industries. And that kind of ties back to what you were asking, Sarah, that I don't think office is becoming less important, but I do think the makeup and design of office space is becoming more and more important on the flip side. While for the high risk industries, well, I don't know. I kind of hit a dead end here, so I'll move along. But Atlanta is uniquely positioned in this way, and it's one of the ways that we really try to encourage new business to consider Atlanta and show them how consistent we can be during a downturn. This really expands a little bit more specifically for tech, and I'm not going to read all the paragraphs or anything, but we can see that compared to the rest of the Southeast and especially other metros, that Atlanta really, and I think this is probably intuitive, but it's nice to see the numbers. Atlanta really boasts a strong tech presence. And I know I'm harping on tech a lot, and we have a pretty diverse group of folks in here, so I don't want to just focus only on tech, but I do track office real estate, at the end of the day, and this is the biggest trend that we see right now. It's expansion of tech. So this is just a beat a dead horse. This is really helping Atlanta to solidify itself as a tech hub. and it's inviting new business down here, and it's helping us weather this COVID storm right now, as a lot of offices or a lot of employees are able to work from home, and collaborate over Zoom calls or Skype or virtual coffees. It really gives Atlanta a huge advantage. Okay, I think this is the last slide for Atlanta. And I'll make this one brief, but Atlanta's rent declines. Oh, hey, Sarah, I see you popped up there.
Hey, had one question going back to your tech slide. We had one question pop up, and I think this is interesting. Can you speak more specifically as to the type of tech that Atlanta is excelling in? What type of tech is being attracted? What type of tech is here? Can you speak a little to that?
Yeah, so I think it really ties back to the names that we're seeing expand in Atlanta. NCR, Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Google, Microsoft, Macy's, they're all expanding in some way in Atlanta. And so I think software development is really the front runner in terms of actual jobs being posted online. Software development is really the front runner there. And even for companies that are not tech companies, companies like Norfolk Southern or Chick-fil-A, who are opening tech hubs around the Midtown area, who are really taking a lot of square footage and are hiring mostly tech-oriented jobs. That's why they want to focus their efforts around Georgia Tech and around the universities in Midtown to hire that talent. A quick anecdote, NCR, if you drive down the corridor, NCR has its logo sort of as a beacon overlooking Georgia Tech. And that was extremely intentional. That was a really, really well thought out initiative to try and invite those Georgia Tech students, those graduating students, to look over and see NCR as a true beacon of possibility. And they built out their lobby to reflect that as well. If you go in the NCR lobby, there's a really cool modern coffee shop and lounge seating areas, and it's really open and inviting. And that was extremely intentional. And the thought was that a tech student would be walking home after a day of classes and want a cup of coffee, or maybe on their way to class. And they might pop into the NCR headquarters, and they might see NCR employees down there, maybe working on solving a problem or developing some sort of software code, and that the student might, potentially approach them or start having conversations there. It's extremely intentional that these companies are locating and seeking out Georgia Tech talent. And that's really a huge driver for Atlanta. That's probably one of our top selling points as a metro, is that Georgia Tech foundation and the growing Midtown tech scene. So you asked me to go next door, and I went around the block to get there, but yeah, software development is probably the biggest job posting that we see.
Thanks.
Yeah. It's funny, when I moved here a couple of years ago, I've been making friends in my neighborhood, and especially before all this, a lot of neighborhood get-togethers and coffees and wine nights. And just about all my friends, they may not work at a tech company, but they're all tech-oriented. And even my one buddy who's not, he was in the healthcare field. He's training himself, teaching himself coding, back-end programming, because he wants to change industries. So I see this on an anecdotal, local neighborhood scale as well. And it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, I was wondering on your previous slide where you had some of the low risk industries here. Do you see that is healthcare on here? Yeah, health services. I have to imagine that a lot of the tech jobs are focused on a lot of those industries, whether it's tech in the health services for Emory or Blue Cross Blue Shield. And even with the universities, I have to imagine that each of those has a tech sector that in and of itself is growing too. Is that fair to say?
Positively. And I have a slide down the road that touches on fintech. I'm so glad you brought that up. Technology as an industry, you're right. It's really a spider web that stretches out into all the other industries and touches them on some level. Especially in commercial real estate, we're going more and more to a tech emphasis. Whether that means hiring more designers to build out our websites or coming up with new ways to show space virtually. There's large pushes in every sector to become more tech oriented. So the full story, you won't know the full story just from this slide, and you won't know the full story just from this slide. But having them together and knowing that government and information and professional business services are all hiring tech developers, I think that's part of the full story of Atlanta, that it's not just Google's and Microsoft, it's Norfolk Southerns and Chick-fil-A's and Coca-Cola's that are hiring, and Home Depot's and ThyssenKrupp's down the road that are hiring a lot of these web developers, software developers. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm glad you brought that up. It's a fun slide toward the end. Let me see. So this is the last slide for the Atlanta Metro, and what it shows is rent declines during the previous recessions. And if you recall from that first slide with the graph for the US, it was about 12.5 and then 14% rent declines for each recession. Atlanta is only showing 7 and 9% rent declines. It's a pretty straightforward slide. This average isn't US average. This average is for these top 10 or so metros. But it's a pretty straightforward slide. It just shows Atlanta has a really consistent rent growth pattern. And I know for some of you that's probably, or for a lot of you, that's probably not, the best thing in the world. But in terms of attracting new business and new investment into Atlanta, this is a great slide to show those New York real estate investors who are really looking for a safe and consistent market to go into. And that benefits everyone when we have more investors coming into the metro. That's how we end up with deals like ThyssenKrupp moving its headquarters, or even Home Depot back when they decided to plant down here. So anyway, I'll move along from this slide. How am I doing on time? It's 12:24. Here are the most fun slides. I'll try not to rush too hard, but definitely let me know if I need to speed things along. So now we've talked about from a national perspective, and then we filter down to Atlanta and what Atlanta looks like compared to other metros. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more and look at the Northwest submarket, which contains Smyrna, and show you sort of how we look at Smyrna and how we present the Northwest submarket to potential investors or tenants who are looking to expand or relocate. What are they looking for? Here's what I'll show you. To start with, this is how we view the market. This is a screenshot that I took from a JLL program that we use. It's called Blackbird. It's similar to Google Earth, but we can upload a bunch of demographic information and cool real estate information as well. So I have a few more Blackbird pictures in here just to bear that in mind. So this Northwest submarket really comes all the way into the perimeter and then stretches out a few more counties. And it includes Marietta, it includes Kennesaw. It goes all the way up. And the metro, by the way, I think it includes 39 counties. It reaches all the way to the Alabama border. We really have a great metro that we don't have any natural barriers like a Chicago or LA that's right up against the water. Atlanta can continue to expand out, which is one of the reasons we have a less dense urban core, because people can move out to the suburbs a lot easier than other metros, and that gives us a lot of benefits. But so this is how we view the market, the Buckhead submarket, the Midtown submarket, et cetera. I would say Northwest competes with, our biggest competitor is probably Central Perimeter. We have about the same number of, in terms of office buildings. When it comes to industrial, I really can't speak too intelligently, but I know the Northeast submarket and the Southern submarkets are really, really hot for industrial right now. But for all intents and purposes, Northwest office mostly competes with Central Perimeter office. This is an example of some of the stats that we look at when trying to market the submarket or the metro as a whole. You can see Northwest is from the bottom. And what this shows is the total office inventory and then the Class A office inventory. Normally this includes Class B, but it just wouldn't fit, so I had to erase that off. But you can see in terms of square footage, Northwest is one of our biggest submarkets in the metro, which makes sense when you consider just how big the submarket is. And despite that, we have a pretty average middle of the road vacancy number at 18%. That's right on par with Central Perimeter. It's lower than Northeast. It's right on par with North Lake, which is sort of over here, brushes up against the urban core. So as it stands, at a $27 average asking rate for a typical class, or just a typical office building in the Northwest is a really, I want to use the word healthy submarket. It's got really consistent fundamentals. Rent growth has been moderate, very, very mild over the last cycle or two. We're one of the only submarkets with development right now, or suburban submarkets. So Midtown and Buckhead have a couple things going on. But as far as new Class A buildings, our ThyssenKrupp building at the Battery is really the only suburban sort of large-scale Class A project going on right now. And this really puts the Northwest, and therefore Smyrna, on the radar for a lot of companies who want to move or expand in Atlanta, but don't want to pay the urban rents of $40, $50, $60 a foot in some cases, when they can move here and get brand new space for half the cost. So that's just a quick look at the types of numbers that I look at pretty much on a daily basis. So here's the fun stuff. This is another screenshot from Blackbird, and this shows on a zip code level, so all the little splotchy points are zip codes. This shows the engineering industry working residents. So basically, the darker the shape, the more engineers live in that zip code. And you can see we're heavily populated with engineers, and this isn't software engineers, just to be clear. This is more traditional engineers, the types of engineers that Home Depot or ThyssenKrupp or Coca-Cola would hire. We really have a great concentration in Smyrna. The little amoeba things that you see floating around that's kind of a heat map of the top 25 engineering companies. So even though Home Depot might hire a lot of engineers, they're not specifically plotted here because they're not an engineering company. But that being said, you do see a pocket of engineering companies along the 75 corridor. And I'd be willing to bet that a lot of their employees are based in this neighborhood. And you know, something I didn't notice until I made these slides is this zip code kind of looks like a man's face looking downward. Now you know that. You're welcome. But yeah, having the only zip code along the perimeter, along the north side of the perimeter, that really hosts a good concentration of engineers, that's a huge advantage for Smyrna and for the Northwest as a whole. If I'm an engineering company or a company that hires engineers and I'm looking to expand, I would ask JLL, and JLL would show this map and probably recommend or encourage looking along this corridor and bringing their business over to the Smyrna, Marietta Northwest submarket. To that same degree, Sarah, here's the FinTech map that I mentioned earlier. it sort of tells the same story. We do have more concentration in the urban markets. A lot of the financial tech workers will live in sort of upper Buckhead, but we also get a lot in Vinings and a pretty good concentration in that same zip code, as well as Central Perimeter. You can see we probably compete for talent with Central Perimeter on this front. If I'm a Midtown FinTech startup and I'm looking to hire 50 new employees to really grow my business, if I go to a JLL, this is the map that I'd want to show that company. I would probably encourage them to look for office product in this region so that they can pull from these little zip codes. This is some of the technology that we use when prospecting or pitching to clients, not only to come to Atlanta, but specifically to show them where they should go. And it highlights some of the strengths of Smyrna. We have other industry types that I didn't have time to include here, but I'm sure other industry types would also show well for Smyrna. And I think it would behoove Smyrna to really understand and know who lives here and what sort of businesses we should really try to reach out for and try to help us grow even more. This is an interesting slide. So these are little PDFs that I snipped from a source from a website called Esri. It's sort of the industry standard for commercial real estate when you want to look at demographic or business changes in certain areas. It's a really robust mapping software that most big shops subscribe to. And this is comparing Smyrna to Atlanta Metro. And there's 3 highlights that I'd like to point out on this. I know it's hard to read. I'll read it out for you. First of all, this upper left is the median household income. Smyrna is above the Atlanta Metro median household income. If I'm an LA firm where, I'm a CEO and I'm looking for housing and I want to live in a housing that more directly reflects sort of my status, looking for these types of metrics help me determine where to move and potentially where to put my company, my operations. To the same degree, we have 55% with a bachelor's degree or higher, while the Metro has 40% with a bachelor's degree or higher. Just another really, really strong selling point for Smyrna. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on was the white collar, just the employment breakdown. Smyrna is 74% white collar workers, 16% blue collar, 10% services, while Atlanta is a little bit more blue collar when you include all of the industrial workers sort of spread out throughout the metro. From an office perspective, this is more what you want to see, but if I was maybe an industrial user or retail user, I might be looking at different metrics to try and sell Smyrna.
Marcus, could you tell us in the bottom left, is that commuters in the orange? Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know mass transit and commuting and traffic is an issue that we all talk about in this community. And we did get some questions about how the pandemic and the changes that we're seeing economically might impact changes with mass transit going forward. But maybe this might be a time where we can touch on that. If you can sort of tell us what this infographic is telling us about commutes in Smyrna.
Yeah, positively. So what this specifically says is, so this percentage right here, 84% drive a car to work or drive alone to work, alone. This doesn't mean that they necessarily stay within Smyrna. This could be Smyrna residents like myself. Typically, I would be commuting into Buckhead. I would be included in that 84%. While the rest of the metro, as more people have access to the public MARTA, basically public transportation, we'll see that number decrease because more people have that option. And as far as it being affected by COVID, yeah, I mean, it's a huge obstacle that we have right now, where in the past, if I'm a large company, if I'm taking more than, say, 30,000 square feet, if I'm taking a full floor in a midtown building, top of my list is being on or next to a MARTA stop, a MARTA station. That, as long as I've been here, has been one of the top requirements for any occupier, as well as investor. Many investors who come to Atlanta really try to look to be on the MARTA line. I think if we were to look at MARTA ridership, the numbers might show a different story, but they still hold, they being investors and occupiers, still hold MARTA to a degree that it's almost required. It's a box that they have to tick. As we push forward, maybe that's not quite the case anymore. I don't know. By no means do I think MARTA will ever be obsolete or anything like that. I think there will always be a place for it. But in terms of these strange circumstances that we're in, I don't see emphasis from companies anymore where they put emphasis on being at a MARTA location. That's about as far of input I can really show on that. I'm afraid I don't have any numbers to fall back on right here, but that's also, again, one of the reasons why Atlanta is sort of positioned in a way to handle this better than a New York or LA, which are a little bit more heavily dependent on public transportation. Yeah, it's a tricky scenario, and I don't envy the great minds at MARTA having to come up with solutions right now. I'm sure they're working hard. But yeah, great question. Thank you for asking. And I'm almost done here, so I'm happy to keep answering questions, but I think I only have just one or two more slides. So yeah, from an office occupier point of view, Smyrna has a lot of great benefits when compared to the rest of the metro and the Northwest submarket as well. So this slide, I really just included this slide to showcase the Cumberland CID and how much, I just wanted to emphasize how much we in commercial real estate and economic development bodies like Metro Atlanta Chamber or the Atlanta Regional Commission, just how much we work with and rely on and study CID projects and timelines, and having a CID in the first place, which, in case you're not familiar, CID is Community Improvement District. Certain areas around Atlanta have designated CIDs. You might all be very familiar with this, so I'll keep it brief. But our Cumberland CID, similar to like a Midtown Alliance, will showcase on their website different projects that the CID is working on with local businesses and local investors to really be more inviting, to really improve streetscapes and improve parks and just help the community progress in a lot of different ways. Again, this slide, I wasn't really looking to cover this specific project. I do think it's interesting. This is the Galleria Office Park looking southward this way on 75. This is a project showcasing this ramp right here that they plan on putting in. This $900 million Northwest Express lanes. That was the reversible lane project on 75 going north and south. A lot of these things make it really easy to sell Smyrna in the Northwest. And I feel like we're very fortunate to have such an active CID and such a robust CID. And if you haven't gone to the website, as local business leaders, I encourage you all to go on and take a look. They have some really great stuff, and they're really great people as well. And the last slide I have for you today is just a few closing thoughts on what it means for occupiers going forward, sort of where we were before the trend was going more and more toward a shared working environment where it was cool, to come in with your headset and sit on a bench with 20 other guys or girls and really have a shared communal space where everyone is open to everyone else. That was sort of the creative trend. And now, currently, we're all many of us are sitting at home and working from our either guest bedrooms or living rooms or whatever. And that's really causing investors and occupiers to really rethink what it means to have an office space. And going forward, I think we will begin to see a fundamental shift in how office space is designed. In the near future, a few things that I'm seeing just anecdotally in our own office has been many health stations with sanitary wipes and Kleenex and the little sanitation soap stuff. We're seeing elevator limitations, one-way passages through hallways and corridors, or if you're going through, a winding cubicle maze, you can only go one way through cubicles. Whenever people are in the office, they have to stagger their seats. A lot of companies are taking pretty innovative ways to create as safe a space as possible. Another fun one was these little tap lights outside of our bathrooms. If you go to the restroom, you tap the light, and when it's on, then it's occupied. And there's a lot of neat little tricks that we're seeing evolve out of this. But on a more long-term basis, some of the new development that we're seeing is sort of geared toward this new world that we're in. The one that jumps into my mind is a proposed building in Chicago where they're building the floor plate only about 10 or a dozen thousand square feet, 10 or 12,000 square feet. And the idea is that each tenant will occupy only one floor or, multiples of one floor. They're not going to take half a floor and share with other tenants. And so having complete control of that space and not really allowing visitors or guests through without really being prepared for it. I think smaller floor plates is probably just one of the ways we're going to see buildings go forward, as well as shared outdoor space. I think we're going to see more individual balconies on different buildings and terrace level balconies just for that one tenant or that one floor, as opposed to, maybe a shared rooftop bar sort of scenario. So I'll end with that. It's 12:45. I know I went pretty long there, but I hope we gathered at least one thing out of this, and I'm really excited to come and present to y'all. Happy to answer any other questions if there's anything else.
Yeah, Marcus, we've got a couple of other questions. Let me ask you one about education and health services, and specifically sort of the switch that we're seeing to distance learning across our education sectors, whether it be colleges and universities offering distance learning or our K through 12 schools. Are you yet able to track any changes or increases in staffing needs and tech infrastructure to accommodate this increase in distance learning?
The short answer is no. We're not able to track specifically which companies are enforcing or giving the option of working from home, doing telehealth. But what we can look at is number of jobs being posted. So we're able to see which companies are hiring right now and what they're hiring for, and maybe the frequency at which they post their jobs. If Home Depot posts a new job, every couple of days, I think that tells a story. And I keep going to Home Depot because they're big and they're Home Depot. But for any given company, and I don't have numbers directly in front of me for education and health services, but specifically for health services, I think it's pretty widely anticipated. I shouldn't say that. I think a lot of people are anticipating health services to really pick up in terms of need. And I think we're going to see a lot of companies divert to telehealth, and I think we're going to see a lot of companies remain and require and keep that face-to-face contact as part of their business offering. But as COVID becomes more and more present, as horrible as that is, we're going to see a lot of health companies and maybe tech health and medical device manufacturers, we're going to see them have more demand and have to hire more and more folks to keep up with demand. And again, whether that translates to more space being occupied by them or if they offer telehealth, I'm really not able to answer that. But from a hiring standpoint, I suspect that it will continue to grow in the near future.
And my guess is that we'll see the same thing with education as the schools start to go back and ramp up. I'm guessing that we probably just don't have that data available yet. But I imagine that we will see some market changes to accommodate that as well.
It's very possible. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have a great answer for you there, but
That's
it wouldn't
right.
surprise me whatsoever.
One other question, and I think this goes back to the infographic. The question is, why is there a dichotomy between the median income and the median net worth between Metro Atlanta and Smyrna? Smyrna has a median income that's higher, but a net worth that is lower. Can you shed any light on that?
That's a great question. The only response that comes to mind, and I really don't spend a lot of my time looking at these specific fundamentals, but the only thing that comes to mind is when we think of the high net worth individuals that do live in the Buckhead areas and who might be, Falcons players or actors that really occupy a lot of the Atlanta metro square footage. That's the only thing I can think of, that Smyrna just probably doesn't have that same concentration of high net worth individuals, be it CEOs or people in the public spotlight or Falcons players or Hawks players or whatever it might be.
Great. And let me, we'll wrap it up with a last question and maybe some closing remarks. Is JLL advising clients on how to safely return to office space? I know you mentioned a couple of ways of things that you've seen. And then is there anything that can you make any closing remarks to some of our small business owners who are on the call, insights that they can take away from this and, potentially use to their advantage in the coming months as we're going through going into this new normal?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. In terms of offering advice for returning to work, JLL does offer a lot of great articles and reports and theories and suggestions on how to get back into the office or whatever work environment you might be returning to. I really don't want to steal anyone's thunder from my company. I would encourage you, if you have any questions specifically about your workspace, I would encourage you to reach out, because I'm sure we have someone in our company who really would love to work with you on figuring that out. But even just going to our website, you'll find a bunch of different resources for going back and how to do that successfully. Or at the very least, you'll probably find examples of what either we're doing or what other companies are doing with success, whether it be wearing masks or, only sitting regardless of if you have a standing desk or not, so that you're kind of confined. There's a lot of different ways and a lot of different things to consider. And then advice for small business owners, the best thing I can think of right now is to have a good or to work toward improving or shaping your tech presence. As people are so dependent right now on food delivery services or just delivery services in general, as we don't have as much control over when we can visit and how long we can stay at your businesses physically, having any sort of online presence is a really helpful trait for local businesses, whether it's if you're a restaurant, being able to order online maybe, or maybe even posting your work hours on a Facebook page for your company, so that we know when you're open, when you're closed. I'm thinking about the Smyrna Recycling Center and how helpful it was that I was able to go in and make an appointment online without having to go there physically and kind of do that. And then when I got there, it was so well organized. They have all the different buckets for the different kinds of glass. I'm kind of thinking out loud at this point, but and the last thing I'll say is being mindful of who lives in our own backyard. Whether it's looking yourself at BLS or whatever, or contacting someone like me or another shop to kind of dig into who lives here and maybe why they live here. Zillow has wonderful housing research as well to kind of understand what homes are doing in your neighborhood. Sort of being aware of who lives here and maybe why. And that could really, really help drive growth for your business, and maybe it'll help future expansions down the line for businesses who are considering Smyrna. If I'm ThyssenKrupp coming to Smyrna, that knowing that a bunch of engineers live here is a really, really helpful piece of knowledge. I think that's about what I have for small businesses. And, I'm sorry I couldn't be a little bit more relatable. But that being said, I think it's helpful to know sort of where the metro is coming from in previous recessions, and it could help shape how we look forward to recovering and getting back to normalcy.
Absolutely. I think it's all fantastic information, and thank you for sharing the information about the Cumberland CID. The SBA will be hosting the director of the Cumberland CID in the next month or so to talk about what's going on at the CID, including the redevelopment plans for Cumberland Mall area. So thanks for touching on that. And for anybody who is interested, please stay tuned for details about that coming up soon. Marcus, there's been a couple of requests for your contact information.
Oh, yeah.
Do you mind sharing your email and your phone number in the chat box for everybody?
Yeah.
And that way, anybody can reach out to you who would like to get in touch with you.
Let me see if I can. Here's a chat.
You go to the
chat. I'll
just
send
be
it
sure
out
that
right
you
now.
choose the drop down for all attendees and all panelists.
I'm doing that right now. I'll go ahead and shoot out my email address. I'm horrible at picking up the phone, and not being in the office, it doesn't connect to my cell phone. So I kind of have this weird system going on. But if you have any questions or follow-up thoughts or comments, I'm more than happy to link up with you, set up a phone call, talk about more, provide, whatever I can. And I'll also say that we have a huge office full of real estate, professionals that would be really excited to help you out. So I encourage you to reach out and ask any questions you might have.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Marcus.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Happy to be a part of this. And I hope y'all have a great day and a great weekend coming up.
Thank you.
All right, y'all.
Ability, I don't know how to take the screen back.
Yeah, there you go.
There it is. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And at this time, before we wrap up, we will go ahead and get into our last trivia question for the Nothing Bundt Cake Buntlet, I believe, that we have. So, Sarah.
Yes, let's pick another trivia question here. All right, everyone get ready. You're going to put your answers in the chat box. Name the 61.5-mile multi-use trail that runs from Smyrna out to the Alabama-Georgia line near Cedartown.
I
Whoa,
think,
we got a lot of responses. I think our first,
I think Kay got it.
Kay Eller, the correct response is the Silver Comet Trail. Congrats, Kay.
I love it.
Woo. So we will email you your gift for that. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and for playing along with our trivia. We'll try to have some more trivia and prizes for everybody next month at our next luncheon.
Yeah, thanks again, Marcus. This was great information. So we really appreciate you coming in for us.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. I really appreciate the invite. Thank you, everyone.
All right, absolutely. At this time, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.